Okay, good morning. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Anna Carugati. I'm the Group Editorial Director of WorldScreen. I'm delighted to be here with a very distinguished panel. The focus on Israel at this market, I believe, is well overdue. Israel has been in the spotlight and in the headlines for the last couple of years, but you will learn this morning that the work has been a long time in the making, and the success and recognition is well overdue. So I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves. My fear is always to mispronounce a name or get a title wrong, which I don't want to do. So Keren, would you like to start?
Hi guys, I'm Keren Shahar. I'm head of distribution and acquisitions for Keshet International.
Hey, I'm Revital Basel. I'm VP Sales in Dori Media Group.
I'm Miron. I'm the president of Ananey Communication.
I'm Armoza, the CEO of Armoza Formats.
Hello, Yoram Mokady, VP of Content and Programming in Hot, which is an Israeli cable company that produces its own shows also.
Okay, so the focus of this morning is scripted formats, and that is also a topic that's been in the news of late, with a lot of shows that have been traveling across the world. I think I first would like to sort of define a scripted format compared to an unscripted. So an unscripted is generally a game show or something that doesn't start with a script. Who would like to start? What is the advantage for a client of yours, a broadcaster, to produce something that comes from a format that is scripted compared to producing something original on their own? What does a scripted format offer?
I think when you look into scripted, when you sell a non-scripted show, you sell a formula. But when you sell a scripted show, most of the time, you sell a remake of script. And, if you take into example, when I still was a producer, under me, In Treatment was developed for 3 years for Hot. And when you buy In Treatment, actually, you buy 3 years of development. And the best Israeli scriptwriters, they were sitting together and put season 1 and season 2. So in a way, in a turn of a key, you can get very quickly get into success and get into something that was fully written and fully developed.
So the broadcaster saves time and money on development, and is it a more cost-effective way of producing than coming up with an original idea?
Well, like Avi said, and In Treatment is a good example. It's something that if you buy it and you can use more or less the full scripted show, then of course you save a lot of money and time to market. You can air the show earlier. And the buyer has the ability to change whatever he wants. I mean, he can turn around more or less the story and the format or stick to the story, but make the right adjustments to his territory, to the needs of his subscribers or viewers. So in that sense, he has the agility, the ability to really tailor the content to its own needs. And I think that's a big advantage.
I think it's not just the business side of shorting the time and the business. I think it's storytelling, unlike a formula of a format, is a point of view, is a journey, it's a story, it's a unique culture story. And good story travels. If scripts are good, they can travel anywhere. And the story is special, and it just not just. I'm sorry that the sales part says the artistic stuff, but it's a very interesting stories.
Okay, I'm going to get into the mechanics a little bit about how loyal a broadcaster remains to a script, how much room they have to deviate in a minute. But first, let's look at Israel for a minute. I have a great job. I talk to a lot of people. I'm curious. I ask a lot of questions. And many of the international broadcasters that I've spoken to, when the topic comes to Israel, invariably, they all say, what's in the water in Israel that is producing so much creativity? And one Israeli executive immediately corrected me and said, no, it's not the water, it's our wine. So whatever it is that is doing this. One of you, speak as an ambassador for your country. What has been fueling so much creativity?
I think there is no one reason. I think there are many reasons. I think in a way the world came to us, the new world came to us and not us to the world, because I think it's time of reset of many things. The old world is kind of collapsing. Technology, what we have seen here is a lot lean on technology. and we are very keen with technology. I don't know if people are aware of it, but really the best show in town in Israel is the news. People are really looking forward for the news, and every day we have a new saga. I always thought that the news is like, in Israel, is like a telenovela for men. You know, Obama, Bibi, players, every day they come, and every day there is a new stuff, corruption, you know, president in jail and stuff. So we live in telenovela. And I think that also infiltrates into the shows that we are doing. One other reason I think I'm a little bit to blame, because if you noticed, you know, the whole thing started, let's say, 5 years ago. And, you know, the creators are young people of 30 and 40. And until 1990, there was no television in Israel. It was like there was one channel, black and white, government channel, very boring. So the kids that are creating now are the kids that grew up on MTV. All of a sudden, there was MTV, Children Channel, a lot of channels. So I think that's another reason that those kids that grew on that television now are start to producing. So I think, and also there is the Israeli nature of the competitive nature, which is very strong. I think Hot and Yes are competing, but they are not competing on rating because, again, Israel is very unique because there is no commercials on Hot and Yes. So the competition is really on impact and not on rating, and that creates better shows. I think Yoram wants to,
in case anyone doesn't know, Hot is the cable platform and Yes is the satellite platform.
First of all, it's not the water because we don't have water. Secondly, I think there is, and in all due humbleness, there is a lot of talent, and this talent has been kept in, as Udi said, until 1990, waiting to explode, and it exploded. Israel is in the Middle East, and for some odd reason, our neighbors are not buying our content. So, you know, we have to explode outside. Also, it's a small country, and if it's a small country, it means that you have to produce sometimes in budgets which are significantly lower than other countries. If you have a low budget for drama, it means that you better come up with a good story because you cannot cover it up with production value. So stories like in Treatment, it was born for a low-budget production where all the money goes into writing and not into a big production, and this is still the case in many of the dramas. So in that sense, I think that the energy and the innovation goes there, and I think all of the players, both the broadcasters and the cable and satellite platforms are daring. Okay, they're really going for things which are different. They're not going through the paved roads. Everybody's going through the less traveled road, and I think that's usually taking all of the industry to a great place. Also, the success of one helps the other. So if In Treatment did well, it opened up the doors. Then later when Keshet succeeds, they open up the door and so on. So I think everybody here is helping out really great, and we're really wishing that everybody would succeed because each of our competitors' success is a success for us in exporting the format.
Success builds on success.
Absolutely.
Right. There's also, for a small market, you're not risk averse. I mean, all of you are not scared of taking risks. Is that correct? And how does that play into your production and decision making?
Yeah, I think it's very much into our culture. You know, if you look back on all those logos, I think 5 years ago, there was probably only one really active internationally. And I think it reminded me a story that they said that an immigrant, you know, we are a nation of immigrants, come from Switzerland, and he writes to his father and says, hey, there is no ski stores here in Israel. Why don't we set a ski store? He said, but there is no snow. He said, no, I think it's a good idea. So he said the ski store. 6 months later, the father called him. He said, how does it go? He said, it goes not so well, but there are another 10 ski stores in the street. So I think that's the nature. And here are the, you know, not 10, but 20 players. But I think the competition kind of fuels itself, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I have to say that, you know, at first we were kind of weren't so sure and thought maybe it's only in the Israeli papers that we are so big. But coming here, and now that we are second to the UK, and that's already, I know, encourage us now we have someone to beat, and I think it's fuel itself, and I think that's part of the success. And also, they always say thinking out of the box. Israelis don't believe in box. They don't know what is the box. And I think that's maybe if someone have to take something from here is really, I think the new world, and when we are working with broadcasters, we see they always come with a very set brief of how the channel have to look like, positive. I think this is out. I think the thinking have to be much more spontaneous and much more different. And I think that's why it's so typical to us, and that's why we are getting good at it.
I think, when we started about 8 years ago, taking content out of Israel, you can create good content, but if you don't have the marketing platform, the ability to bring it to the world, then it's unknown. And I think once the world got open to getting an idea from all over, and once there was the distribution platform there, then all of a sudden people start relating to the stories and the content that come out of Israel. And I think also the focus of the storytelling is a unique element that the show that comes out of Israel is not just for the sake of being on television. There is a reason why behind it. And this is kind of led the way in terms of marketing as well.
Let's get a little bit into the mechanics of a scripted format. I'm going to go to Prisoner of War first. Keren, how much, if we look at Prisoner of War and then we look at Homeland, which is the one that has gotten so much attention, how much leeway did Keshet allow the broadcaster to tailor the story to their audience? And did that happen only in the US, or has it happened in other situations too?
Well, I think in terms of Homeland and the American market in general, that's a bigger question. We all know an American client is not like other clients necessarily.
Are we more difficult?
I'm not sure about difficult, but I think the Americans, they see, there's a reason why they're buying the format, the scripted format. There's a reason why they bought Prisoners of War, but the leeway to the American market is bigger. And we did that with the Chatufim. And it's fine. I think a scripted format needs to change and be adapted for as much as it needs to for that market. That's fine. I think as long as your partner on the other side gets the essence of the show and the engine of the show and lays out to you what his vision is for his audiences, that's fine. So obviously, Prisoners of War, I don't know how many of you know, was sold based on scripts only. We saw Prisoners of War before we shot one frame of the series in Israel.
I didn't know that.
Okay, so the story goes like this. Gideon Raff, the creator and director of Prisoners of War, at the time he was in LA, and he met with Avner, Keshet CEO, and he told him about his idea that he had, which he was intrigued about prisoners of war coming back home after years of captivity and how that affects them and especially their families, more from a personal point of view, less than a national, I think, point of view. He gave Avi the script. When Avi landed back, he gave Gidi a call, told him, come back home, we're doing this. Avi showed the script to Rick Rosen, our agent at WME. And Rick said, my client, Howard Gordon, is just coming off his last season of 24. This is the perfect next project for Howard. Howard and Alex Ganza, they read the script, immediately were intrigued by this idea and said, send us more scripts. So Gidi translated his scripts, 12 other scripts in a plane ride from LA to Tel Aviv. And that was it. And obviously, for those of you who've seen Chatufim, the Israeli version, and Homeland, the American version, you can see the differences
Yes.
where Homeland went. Homeland went to the more, for lack of better words, action way, direction. You know, there's a threat on national security. Chatufim, as I see it, and I think as Gidi sees it, if I may be presumptuous and speak on his behalf, is more family drama. It's about these people being away for 17 years. One of them, his then fiancé, went on to marry his brother. The other, on the other side, kept loyal and fought every day to bring him back. And these two guys came home and they were strangers to their family. They were strangers to their friends who went on to build careers, and they don't, you know, they don't even know what the internet is, you know. So yes, there's a lot of differences, but there are also a lot of similarities, which I think are in the sensibility that Gidi captured in his scripts, that I think Howard and Alex really managed to capture and translate in their version.
Right. Revi and Avi, you too have had experience in the United States. Let's just stick with the States for a moment, because it's the big market, it's the lucrative, it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but it's more difficult, isn't it? You need to deal with an agent, you know, by definition, in order to get something on the air in the US?
In the US, basically, it's all about building the package. It's not enough to come with the format. It's about picking up the right showrunner, the right production, and in a way, you kind of create a new vision of the series. And it's also, you know, it's the most demanding market. They start every year a process of getting hundreds or thousands of ideas and then narrowing them to ordering a script and then into pilot and then into... So the process is long, and you need to... And each part of the process is a junction that you can move forward or go backward to square one. So, for example, you know, one of the scripted show, the Run Quadruplet, is actually these days the pilot is shot in the US, but this is already for the second time. So we've been there before. There was a pilot shot, was not accepted, and 2 years later we found a different package, different showrunners, and we got a second chance, which is also quite unique.
And you have several projects in the United States right now, don't you?
We have in the pipe actually 3 scripts in the development. And that's why I think it's also, and we did that with our agent, with William Morris. But I think also it's case by case. So for example, we can talk about our experience within treatment that had, I think, 17 or 18 versions around the world, from Japan through Brazil and French Canada and Argentina and US. And in this case, it was different because the amount of adaptation in that format is much lower. I think it's more culture adaptation than really the format adaptation,
Right.
because it's very formatted. So I think it's really individual on the format, on the title you're working on. And
Right. Well, give me an example of any of you, a scripted format. How did you present it to the broadcaster, and then how did they follow through and make it their own?
I can give you a few examples on a treatment that is very funny and really emphasize how sometimes local cultural sensitivity is very important. For example, in Japan, they could not do that a grown-up person will go to a psychologist. So we had to do him his high school counselor, because it's not accepted or earnable to go to see a therapist when you're a grown-up. Another example, in Russia, it was the only place in the world that the therapist was a lady, a woman, because they will not go to a man therapist. So Hagai had to go to Russia and to work with them how to switch all the characters and make the therapist a woman. So I think this kind of things, even in a format that, if you see the HBO version versus hot version, first season, it's quite the same.
Right.
It's
right.
very,
Yes.
very similar. They pick a lot of the stories very much stay loyal to the Israeli version. But in every country, they had to tweak it a little bit in order to make it local.
One thing that I've learned from shiny floor formats, you know, that has to be expensive, they have to be flashy and whatever. Given the fact that Israel has to work with smaller budgets because the market is smaller, the advertising is smaller. When you start with something that is more cost efficient, is that more appealing to a broadcaster because they're thinking, we don't have to spend that much money to put that kind of quality and storytelling on the screen?
According to my experience, it's not that important. I'm just coming from a long tour in the United States, and I kept mentioning the cost effective. And the point is that, you know, it's like you are standing in a line for a lottery, and you have so many chances to succeed. And for them, success is really only when you reach the 5th season and not the 1st season. So that's why they want to come to the lottery stand with the best ticket possible. So that's why I think they are ready to put much more. We don't understand why, because we are coming from a limited budget environment. But I think they don't care so much because they really want to put all the money to make sure that they have the best possible one. I want to say that, you know, I think another, because we are talking about different ways to work with America, we happen to be the representative of Viacom. And they saw the success in Israel, and they realized the potential there is in Israel. So it's really not a pitching session, but really working together with them on developing whatever they see the needs is. And I think that's another way of doing it with Israeli companies, just to see it as a laboratory, just like countries are doing. If you talk on if you see the high tech, you know, they see that in Israel it's a good place for develop, and then the big companies are setting developing centers in Israel. And I think that way will go for content, you know, with now big companies are coming to Israel, set their developing countries, and then it's just a dialogue and not a pitching session.
I think
I just want to relate. Oh, sorry. Ladies first.
I think it's very different. U.S. and one big agent once told me, don't sell cheap, sell big. They want the next big thing. Don't tell them it's cost effective. So it's U.S. is that way. But in Europe and in Asia and in Latin America, and we sell a lot in these countries, they really appreciate it. And they really appreciate the mileage that you can save them. Like you can really, and I think it's really helping in the other, except in the U.S., it's really working.
But even in the U.S., if you come with a story and you tell them this story worked for a ridiculous $250,000 an episode drama, if you put in the production value, you'll get a great show that works. Okay, so in that sense, that one line can help, of course. And of course, in Europe, the budgets are lower, but still significantly higher in Western Europe than in Israel.
In any production, the budget is always limited. And it's never enough, right? And I think what was great about the Israeli storytelling is that we took the budget limitation and focus on what is the drama. The drama is building the characters. The drama is the level of written of the script. So this is the essence. The essence is the close-up. And if you can take it and create, like, you know, the Barbash brothers in Israel show that we are distributing The Naked Truth, which is a police suspense drama that takes place only at the police station. So you don't need, you know, expensive car chase. You only can focus on the story and the way it's developed.
Let's look beyond the Western world. There have been significant inroads made in China and Japan. Do you want to speak to that? Dori, right, has been doing quite a bit with those markets.
We work a lot with Japan. We actually, when we were negotiating in treatment, they told us it's the first format they're buying since 1999 because their market is really based on a business model that motivate them to develop themselves. So they don't buy formats and they don't buy scripts at all. And it was really the first time in many, many years that they did, and it was very successful. And they're now trying to work on a theater show for that, and it was well. And we work with them on co-development. And I think it's an extremely interesting process, and it's working very well. And these two creativity that are very different. The Japanese are so creative. on one hand, and the Israelis, but a very different creativity. It works really well.
Avi, you've been active in China, haven't you?
But we've been active, China is in a stage where they're revealing the world of formats. Being there 3 years in the last 6 months, it's kind of remind me about Israel like 10 years ago. Starting, revealing the world of format and starting going internationally. And my sense, they are now only focusing on non-scripted. Probably the next stage will be scripted. But my sense, like anything that happened in China, that it will be a very quick process. That already we're seeing the few new formats coming out of China, and now that they are revealing this world, we'll see a boom of content coming out of China as well.
Is drama easier to adapt than comedy? Is comedy more local?
You know what they say in Hollywood? Everybody can make you cry, but very few can make you laugh.
That's true.
Yes,
Keren, you
I
have
would agree
both,
with
right?
That.
You
I would
have-
agree with that. I can give you an example from our comedy, which is the #1 comedy in Israel, Traffic Light, which we sold to 20th for Fox. And they loved it. And they laughed when they saw the Israeli versions. And it was great, 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 great. And then when it came down to adapting it, they toned it down. And I'm being very uncharacteristic of me, diplomatic when I'm saying toned it down. Traffic Light is about 3 best friends in various stages of life. One is married with a kid. One is engaged, he has a girlfriend, then he becomes engaged, then they're married, and one is single. But the issue is the relationship with the women in their lives, and the women in Traffic Light are very strong-natured. They dominate or manipulate their men in the life, as we women do. And when the Americans came to adapt the script, apparently you can't have dominant women on network television in the States. So the women became soft, their sting, they took out the sting, I think. And again, this is, comedy. And this, by the way, this is what the Americans loved about the Israeli show. But in order to adapt the humor to network television, again, maybe if this was to be produced for cable, I think that may be a different scenario. Yeah. But for national television, for network television, it needed to be toned down, and it didn't work on the US. The series aired for 1 season, and that was it. On the other hand, CTC in Russia have produced 5 seasons, 120 episodes, 120 scripts and counting, very much staying with the humor of this show, and it's doing brilliantly for them.
We actually have the same. We have a comedy called Lola. We sold it, I don't know, over 100 countries. I don't know how many remakes. And the Russian did more episodes than we did. And it was all over the world. In the American pilot, they decided to make it a drama instead of a comedy with the same script. And you didn't laugh. Yeah, it wasn't funny. And it's really maybe because maybe also the American humor is very American.
I think what we're going to see is also the falling of the borders between drama and comedy. And I think a good drama should have comedy in it. And a
good comedy should have.
And I think that the very formatted, that every 2 minutes a joke and all that, and laughing and peaks and stuff, I think that's out, and we'll see more and more, more intuitive drama and comedy, just like life.
From your experience, is there more that connects us as human beings regardless of the culture of the country, or is there more that divides us?
Can you say again?
Is when you're looking to adapting a family drama or any sort of drama that speaks to universal themes, if it's good, right? That's what makes it travel. Is there more that are audiences more similar around the world when it comes to their core, or are we all very, very different?
Definitely becoming more and more alike because of the networks and all that. I think it started very different. But I think there is the communication, the good communication is going, and I think the world would look much more similar in the future, and the same go for its taste for television.
With all due humbleness, I think American television has been leading the world in that. So you have the whole world growing up on television, so and then the UK and other countries. So you have a lot of people which their television culture comes from the same place. So that's a common basis for television. Okay, so when you want to adapt, it's always back to those shows which everybody grew with. Of course, if you wanted to travel, the examples that Keren made regarding comedy, I think Israeli humor and Russian humor are closer than Israeli humor and American humor, maybe. So maybe that's why on STS it worked much better than in the US. With the drama, even unique stories, we had a big hit in Israel called Succesful, which was really about local friends, a local story in Jerusalem about friendship of people which were the underprivileged, who couldn't make a living on buses, more or less. It was a very Israeli story. But that was picked up by John Wells and is being now written for the US, and they did the adaptation of Shameless because they picked up a unique story, a very Israeli story, and are adapting it to the American reality, which is still, since 2008, very similar economically to the story written in Israel. So you take very, very unique stories, very Israeli stories, and you can see they can adapt well, as was Chatufim in a way, which was adapted to Homeland, a story of prisoners of war, which was an Israeli prisoners of war, but very well adapted to something relevant to America, because America had the POW heritage in it since I think Vietnam, more or less.
Right.
Although I have to say, with regards to Chatufim, we were very surprised by how international audiences related to Chatufim. I'm talking about the Israeli version itself, which airs in about 20 territories. And the format, not only the US, the format is now, has been sold to Russia, Turkey, Korea. I would never imagine, we have Latin American deals, I would never imagine that Chatufim would travel as it did, because again, it is such an Israeli story. The issue of prisoners of war is so in the center of the Israeli dialogue, and it's even a controversial issue for us. But again, I think that goes to show this drama is not about
Right. It's the
the
families
prisoners
and
of war. That's why.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that in addition to it, I really agree with Keren, and I think that maybe in the last year, and that even the very Israeli stories, like we distribute Shtisel, it's about Rabbi Shtisel in a small Hasidic community in Jerusalem, and it's an amazing script, and they won 11 out of 13 TV awards in Israel, but I didn't think I will sell it around the world, and we sold both the tape, but also now we're negotiating few territories of doing a remake about a Hasidic community in their country, countries that I would never imagine that we will manage to sell it to. Because I think something also opened up in the mind of people to listen to Hebrew that before didn't travel, like they now see Swedish content or Danish or French before it didn't happen, and now people are more used to listening to other languages. We have tapes like Hot, we produced for Hot Split, we sold it to 82 territories, the Israeli tape. So it's one thing that the audience is more open to the Israeli tape, and one thing is that it is a good story can travel, even if the original was very different to your own country.
Right. Are you seeing an increase in demand for scripted formats?
Definitely. I think we're seeing broadcasters shifting their budget more and more from acquisition to local productions because they realize that the locality of it gives them higher ratings, higher exposure. I think this is something the Israeli market, the commercial television market, has learned pretty early on. You know, we don't air foreign acquisitions on the networks in Israel. So with that, I think this increases the demand for scripted acquisitions. So.
And something is happening with the process where we produce to ourselves. We don't commission anymore a 22-episode drama or a 10-episode drama because the number of episodes is not relevant anymore to us. We have a VOD service. We can broadcast whenever we want. So you can come up with a good story, which could be just a few episodes. You can come up with a story which could be 27, 50, or 9, which means that the stories are better written and the number of episodes is suited to the story, and sometimes even the length of the episode changes from episode to episode, meaning that you don't have to really cut when you don't have to cut, and you don't have to lengthen it when you don't. It means you have a tighter story, you have a better story, and more room for the creators to really write the story the way you want to write it and end it with the cliff that they want to end it. So that process is a very good process, which enables us to make better dramas. You make better dramas, there's more demand, and the time to market that whoever purchases that story saves, and the very cheap prices that all of us sell, we sell cheap, makes it worthwhile to buy the Israeli formats.
I think, you know, we started by selling the Israeli drama as format, and it was mainly for the US market. But what we find out that, you know, for example, with our format Hostages that was adapted in the US, but then everybody was starting to be curious that they want to see also the Israeli version. If it's a good story, let's go to region. And for the first time, we were able to sell the Israeli version to the BBC. You know, Israeli was growing up on BBC drama. And the notion that we can sell a scripted show to the BBC, and now it's not only the BBC, it's on Canal Plus, and to Germany and Canada. So there is a notion of let's go to the origin and understand the story better, and it doesn't matter that it comes in Hebrew.
Yeah, I think in answer to your question, the technology make it now much more available for cable channels that were not in the game of production now to be in that game. And I think that a lot of channels that will rely just on, or mainly on acquisition, see that they can localize by producing. So I think this world of scripted just growing and growing.
We just have a few more seconds. Just finally, a snapshot on the Israeli TV market looking forward 2, 3, 4 years. You're positive about growth and opportunity. Do you see more collaboration with international, since the market is small? Is that the key to growth for everybody, working with international companies?
Yeah, we think a lot that now that there is more awareness to the Israeli market and creativity, we see a lot of potential in collaboration. We have a few deals in the pipe of investment in Israeli seasons, like really investing and buying part of the IP and participating, like deficit financing, because the model in Israel is cost plus usually, and only in rare opportunities you deficit finance. So we are really working on models in which we can act also with foreign money as a mini studios and stuff.
I think the Israeli market is very mature, and in that respect, many companies have already met a glass ceiling, and they realize that their way to go is internationally. So I think you'll see just growing, and I think events like that just fuel, you know, the energy to do more. And I think other than we have to give credit also that other than the companies that had enough money to get on the board, there are many talented Israelis in the audience that I think it's the next tiers that will create also a company of their own. So I think you'll see this direction just go.
All right. Well, thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you all for coming, and let's thank our panelists. Thank you.